APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Concili Incorporated is Nevada's premier Democratic campaign firm, fighting for progressive issues and candidates for over a decade, and proud sponsor of Battle-Born Progress.
This episode of Out in Front brought to you by
Concili Inc., Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt, as well as our episode sponsors, Save Lives Nevada and Washoe Education Association.
Really exciting discussion that we apparently don't have sound for just yet. So I'm going to pretend like I'm saying stuff until we have confirmation that we are fully and actually being heard. The sound is back. Hello, everybody. We are here for Out in Front on Thursday night, 5 o'clock as always. And I couldn't be happier to be filling in for the filling-in host because we have a very exciting discussion tonight. It's all about one of my favorite topics, which is about how bad billionaires are. And joining me tonight is Margarida Jorge with Healthcare for America Now, HCAN, which is one of our treasured national partners who does a lot of work with us. And also joining me tonight is our own Story Bank organizer, Brenda Rodriguez, who's been working on the Day of Action and surrounding the Tax Billionaires report that we just released this week. And we're excited to talk to you tonight all about the tax reform packages that are being considered at the congressional level right now. And we're happy to take your questions. Also, there'll be lots of jokes and dunks on various billionaires tonight, including Elon Musk, who, as you may have seen, has several more children that we didn't previously know about, and has also fallen through on his offer to buy Twitter. So that means that no such reinstatement for Donald Trump on the platform, which I'm sure he was looking forward to. But I want to start things off tonight with bringing in MJ. Welcome to the show. Start us off by just detailing the report that Americans for Tax Fairness and HCAN put out this week, and put that in context for us for what's happening in Congress right now with the reconciliation bill. You're on mute.
Isn't it funny that we do this all day and still can't figure out the mute thing? It is pretty late my time. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. So I think what I'll do is give people a little bit of context about why this conversation is so timely right now. And that is because you may know that Congress is finally, after almost a year, they are finally about ready to introduce some key provisions to what we call the reconciliation bill. Now, this is probably the last piece of legislation, except for the federal budget, that Congress will work on this year. And Congress this year hasn't really legislated much around issues like taxes and healthcare. So all of those things are getting rolled into this package. The package will include a couple of really key things that I know Battle-Born works on and we work on at HCAN. Among those things, prescription drug reform, which will finally create negotiated prices in Medicare. So it'll lower prices for people who get their prescription drugs through Medicare. It will create an out-of-pocket limit for what people have to pay on their prescription drugs. It will stop insurance companies from raising the price of prescription drugs faster than inflation, which they've done for a decade. That's a really good provision. Another really good thing about that provision is that it doesn't cost anything, it pays for itself. So that's a policy that saves money. And because it saves money, it doesn't require us to raise taxes or do anything like that to come up with revenue. The other couple of really big things in the package are healthcare provisions that would prevent healthcare premiums from going up. We have to pass those provisions. If we don't pass those provisions, they're called the APTC provisions. If we don't pass them, about 13 million people will see their premiums go up. And the other big part of the package is the tax reform. And what's exciting about the tax reform is for the last 50 years or so, mostly everything that Congress has done on taxes has been to actually give more loopholes, tax breaks, and giveaways to the richest people in America. This is the first time in decades where there are proposals on the table to raise taxes on millionaires, billionaires, and corporations, including some of the greedy corporations that are doing things like raising gas prices. So it's a pretty exciting bill. We have the prospect of raising about $1 trillion by taxing rich people, so millionaires and billionaires and corporations. And that funding, that revenue that's raised, then gets put into deficit reduction in healthcare and some climate change provisions. So that is happening right now. And the debate is pretty heated. And so all day today, we've been talking to folks about one particular provision, that's the Millionaire Surtax. And that would, for the first time, increase taxes on millionaires. That's like the richest 0.02% of people in the country. It would be the first time that we tax that group of people in quite some time. It would raise a lot of revenue. So that's the legislative debate. This package really has to be done by like the first week in August. So we don't have that much time, even though it seems like that might be a long time. The wheels of Congress move very slow. So it's not at all a very long time. And we have one additional challenge, which is that a number of members of Congress are out with COVID, which is a real problem because we need 50 votes. And right now, we have a couple of people that can't vote because they're out with COVID. So everybody is sort of on the edge of their seat, waiting for this to come up for a vote. It's got to go through the parliamentarian. So that's the context. So we released the report yesterday, and the report is making the case that we really ought to tax the richest people in America. And by that, I mean billionaires. The number of billionaires has increased over the last several years. They made a ton of money during the pandemic. And we released a report yesterday called Billionaires Buying Elections: How the Nation's Wealthiest Translate Economic Power into Political Clout. And it's really about the research that we did that shows that in the last 10 years or so since the Citizens United decision in the Supreme Court, Citizens United enabled basically unlimited political giving from corporations. Since that decision, the amount of money that billionaires are giving to Republicans has really skyrocketed. And so we think that's really a critical issue, because one of the challenging things about changing the law or changing the tax system to make it more fair is that billionaires really have enough money at this juncture to buy politicians and buy elections and keep the system rigged in their favor. So a couple of the key things in the report: almost half of the money, about 47%, almost $200 million raised by the House and Senate Republican super PACs came from just 27 billionaires, right? So 27 people, 27 individuals are fueling half the spending on the Republican side, including spending on politicians who are, election deniers, right? People that were involved in the January 6th insurrection. We think this is, pretty troubling, and that it really creates a risk to democracy when we have people that are so rich that they control more than half the wealth in the country, and they can give an unlimited amount of money to politicians so that those politicians can then pass policies that keep them getting richer as opposed to paying what they owe in taxes so we can build an economy that works for everybody.
Thank you for that rundown. That's really interesting stuff. And I think it's another bite at the apple that Biden administration and congressional Democrats are getting to pass some of these provisions that I think poll after poll has really demonstrated are broadly popular with large swaths of people. There's really no rational reason to oppose it unless you're Joe Manchin and are an oil tycoon living in West Virginia. I want to zero in on something you mentioned towards the end of that, something we highlighted in our state report too, and in the national one as well, which is the disparity in how much is being given really to Republicans versus Democrats or other candidates. Can you first off talk about just like that disparity? And, you mentioned something else, which is that the Republicans now are, I think, irredeemably tarred with the election denier stench at this point, given their backing up of Donald Trump and their refusal to cooperate with the select committee and their hearings and such. Can you talk about the relationship there between the ultra wealthy and specifically what's in it for them to support candidates like this who are against democracy or at least don't care if democracy is shredded as long as they get their tax cut?
Mm-hmm. I think one interesting thing about the report, so the report obviously doesn't argue that rich people don't give money to Democrats, right? Rich people give money to Democrats and Republicans, but there are some interesting differences. So for the Republicans, almost half the money in their two biggest super PACs comes from billionaires. So about 47% comes from billionaires. For Democrats, in their two top PACs, their political action committees, only about 17% comes from billionaires, right? So Democrats are raising money from a more diverse set of donors, not as much from billionaires. So it's not that no billionaires contribute, but it's a smaller proportion of the money. The other kind of interesting difference is that the billionaires that are contributing to the Republicans, almost all of them come from the financial sector. They all come from Wall Street, stock trading, that type of thing, the financial sector. It's different on the Democratic side. On the Democratic side, you have some that come from that sector, but a lot of them also come from tech, some come from cryptocurrency, some come from retail. So it's a more diverse set of people that are giving to Republicans. So I think that's actually reflected in a lot of the policies, right? So for instance, one of the reasons to your question about why are they giving to, what's in it for them to be giving to Republicans, what's in it for them is that the Republicans are going to support tax policies that enable these billionaires to hold on to as much of their money as possible, right? So the tax policy is really important to them. President Trump, who was supported more than half the money for Trump's reelection in both his campaigns, came from a Nevada billionaire, Sheldon Adelson, who I'm sure you guys, before his passing, used to mention quite a bit. So Trump's big achievement in his 4 years in office was passing a tax law that gave tax breaks mostly to rich people. So it essentially moved about $1.7 trillion in tax breaks to the richest people in the country. So that's what's in it for them, right? What's in it for them are tax policies that enable them to just keep hoarding wealth, right? Just keep hoarding wealth, which is sort of the culture of billionaires in this country. And you might sort of ask yourself, well, damn, how much money do they need? For them, it's like a game, right? Gaming the system is in and of itself a satisfying reward. And so their sort of impetus is to keep the system rigged up this way. And especially in the financial sector, we just saw this in the pandemic. During the pandemic, regular people were struggling, but the stock market was just off the chain, just performing incredibly. And so billionaires, even though regular people had lost their jobs, lost their healthcare, struggling with all kinds of risks to their health. We knew all about the frontline workers, about seniors. But for billionaires during the pandemic, they actually increased their wealth. So not only did we get a much bigger number, not only did the number of billionaires increase, but the billionaires increased their wealth by about 70% during the 2 years of the pandemic, from March of the first year till about April of 2022. That's a lot of money, 70%, that's about $2 trillion. Now, when you've increased your wealth $2 trillion, you want to hold on to it. And so you really want to elect people that are not going to pass policies that will do things like, for instance, make you pay more because you increased your wealth.
And I think that the point, like to even piggyback onto that too, is that not only are these candidates people that will pass policies that allow them to hoard more wealth, but it's that they're now also the party of passing policies to make it harder for people to vote for other politicians who might not share that agenda, thus further cementing that wealth advantage.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the lockdown, all the stuff that's happening with January 6th, and remember, it's not just that there was an insurrection in January 6th. It's that these donors are actively supporting politicians that are trying to change election laws, right? They're trying to stop people being able to determine the outcome of elections by changing the law. And so it is fundamentally anti-democratic, but that is their way of making sure that they can hold on to their wealth in perpetuity. So they have a big interest in this, keeping the system pretty locked down at everybody else's expense. And they don't care if it means that they jeopardize democracy or they erode. They don't care about any of that, right? What they care about is really holding on to their wealth.
Yeah, GOTV for billionaires looks a little different.
It looks different, yes.
There's not as many people you have to knock doors.
Right, none of the billionaires are waiting in line for water while they wait for 10 hours outside a polling place. That is not happening for them.
No. And and they can write a nice fat check to their preferred candidate. So it really, they're not affected by these things. I do also want to back up again to something you mentioned, which is that, because of things like the raising revenue through taxing the ultra rich, that these things that the money goes toward essentially become revenue neutral, right? Is that correct? That these things are paid for in the bill because this provision, right? Right.
And so, I think what people have to understand is most billionaires in America pay lower tax rates than teachers, nurses, firefighters. And they do it because our tax code is Swiss cheese. It really is. There's so many loopholes. So one of the biggest ones, and President Biden has been a huge proponent of this, President Biden is actually he's a big champion of more fair taxes. And one of the things that he has argued is that, regular people like us who have jobs, we pay taxes on our income from work, right? So you have a salary, you're in a tax bracket, you pay taxes every year. If we get promotions this year and we end up making more money and we're in a higher tax bracket, then next year we pay more taxes. But that's not true for billionaires and millionaires. For billionaires and millionaires, they don't make money off of work, right? Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these guys are not going to the job and clicking a ticket. There's no time clock for these guys, right? They are making their money off of stock assets, primarily stock dividends. When you increase your wealth, so you're making your money from stock and the stock market soars and you make gazillions of dollars more, you do not pay any money on that increase unless you sell the stock, which people don't do. And so what happens is that stock gets passed from generation to generation. And for generations, people can be increasing their wealth and they're not paying any taxes on it at all, right? And so when we talk about policies that would tax wealth like work, we're talking about equalizing the system. If I get a promotion and I get into a higher tax bracket, I'm going to pay more because I made more. And the case that we're trying to make is it should be the same for billionaires. If I go from being a millionaire to a billionaire because my stock increases during a pandemic, then actually it shouldn't just be that I pay taxes if I sell those assets, I should be taxed on the increase in my wealth, right? I should be contributing that back. So you can imagine there is a lot of resistance among the super ultra wealthy to that type of change. And it's very uphill to push it.
And speaking of uphill and pushing things, I wanted to, my last question before I bring in Brenda is in context of some of the reporting we've seen today of, some of the Dems in Congress getting a little bit, weak-kneed about raising taxes, even on the wealthiest. And I can, on one hand, understand some of that anxiety because, when people in an attack ad just hear raise taxes doesn't necessarily give them the full story. I guess and we're a communications organization, just from a communications perspective, how do you see the Democrats in Congress with the Biden administration threading that needle of explaining specifically why these taxes that we're talking about in this bill are on people that have billions and billions of dollars, that this isn't a tax on working class folks? And what do we need to do to reassure, I guess, members of Congress who are feeling a little bit froggy on this, given their upcoming election in the fall?
This is a very provocative question because I've been working on taxes for a long time. And frankly, I have lost my patience with some of these Democrats. And the reality is, like, some of these Democrats, they don't want to raise taxes because there are rich people who give to Democrats who are their donors. And they don't want to raise taxes on their donors. And I think, I said this in a meeting earlier today, and I was not popular for saying it, but I just think we need to call BS on that. Billionaires can afford to pay more in taxes, and they won't suffer at all as a result of it. They're hoarding money. And so Democrats need to step up to the plate and decide who they are, and they need to deliver on their promises, right? Because every other story in the Beltway media is the story about Democrats, not acting as the party of the working class. They have a choice to make. Right? The choice that they have to make is whether or not they are going to tax the rich and corporations in order to do things like provide healthcare and clean air and clean water for their constituents, or are they going to kowtow to their donors who are really full of crap, right? Because a billionaire can certainly afford to pay more in taxes and still be a billionaire many times over. Even if we were to tax billionaires in this package, they still would not be paying the same tax rate as a teacher, as a firefighter, as a nurse. So I think in a bunch of ways, we should stop sort of coddling Democrats, and we should have a tough conversation with our allies who are Democrats about which side they're actually on. Because at some point, talk is cheap, and what matters is what they're going to do. Are they going to, this is 50 years we haven't taxed the richest people in America, and these people are infinitely rich people, right? And so the fact that they may be Democratic donors is really not a good reason to tax them. There's got to be things that are more important than that.
Absolutely. And as you detailed earlier, too, most of the money that billionaires give already goes to their competition anyway. So right. How much are you truly giving up? But we'll get more into that later. I want to bring in Brenda as our story bank organizer here at BBP. Brenda, talk to us about the Billionaires report we put out earlier this year. What was in that report, and what did that show about Nevada billionaires who've increased their wealth since the start of the pandemic?
Hi, Will. It's good to be back on OIF today. So we actually released the Billionaires report earlier this year. It was a joint effort between ATF, HCAN, and Battle War Progress. It actually highlighted the wealth that the 16 billionaires here in Nevada made in the last year since the pandemic started. And it was really mind-blowing because, first of all, I personally didn't really know anything about taxes. I didn't even know that there were 16 billionaires living in the state. So that was like crazy. But they
want you to know that they're living here. They
That's
live
right.
in a gated community.
They're not advertising. There's no sign outside their house for sure.
Right.
They're out in Anthem or Seven Hills or Southern Highlands. You wouldn't mingle with them out at downtown Las Vegas or Fremont Street or the grocery store or anything.
Yeah, definitely not. But those 16 billionaires, their wealth increased by $33.6 billion, or about 60%. And that's kind of like MJ said, as many Nevadans were struggling in these last 2 years to even just pay their rent, as rent prices have skyrocketed. They've made so much money. And so in the report, which we can drop in the chat, you can just see exactly how those 16 billionaires have grew their wealth. We kind of break it down by each person. And when people kind of ask, like, so what is that really going to do? Like, what is taxing these billionaires going to do? So if we were to actually pass this, Nevada could see about $225 million or nearly $350 million in the next year, respectively. So I think that's obviously a lot of money that we would see. And so I would really, really highly encourage everyone to check out that report. We're going to be linking it down below. So when you get a chance, definitely check it out.
Yes, definitely take a read, because you'd be surprised at the amount of folks who are on that list whose names you might actually recognize. Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, what can you tell us about the billionaires in Nevada and what their political activity has entailed? Some of these folks are big Trump GOP donors. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So as MJ was talking about earlier, we saw in the report that ATF released yesterday the amount that Sheldon Adelson and his wife, Miriam Adelson, contributed to Trump's presidential run. So both of them, they gave $120 million. So I don't know about anyone else watching, but I couldn't just talk to my partner and be like, hey, let's just give $120 million to somebody real quick. So that's just really crazy. And like MJ said,
for it, it's fine.
Oh yeah, he's just giving out money to anyone. So if anyone wants to, get $120 million, hit up Brian. But that investment, like MJ said, worked out great for billionaires because that was what helped them collect that $2 trillion in wealth, or 70% during the pandemic. And then we can link that down below in the chat as well, so everyone can take a look at that report. That one's just kind of like billionaires from all over the country, but it does highlight some of the billionaires here in the state as well.
One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, I've noticed this over the years working on taxes and healthcare, is like, I think some people say, rich people are going to get richer. Whatever, rich people, like, what does it have to do with me? One thing that I think people don't understand that's really important to understand is that when we give tax breaks to rich people, so when we give away money because rich people don't have to pay their taxes, it does cost the rest of us, right? So when Trump passed his Trump tax law in 2017, that law increased the deficit. So all the people that are worried about the deficit, it raised the deficit by over $1 trillion because a lot of it wasn't paid for. The portion of it that was paid for cut $400 billion out of healthcare. So when rich people are getting tax breaks, right, like they're not paying their fair share, when they're not paying into the system, there's a hole. That money that they're not paying into the system, it's missing money. And what that either means is the rest of us are paying more or we're just going without. So if you've ever wondered, if you're in the United States and you're like, well, damn, why is childcare so expensive, right? Here in Washington, D.C., the cost of putting a toddler in childcare costs more than sending a kid to college, right? How come the U.S. doesn't have paid family medical leave? Because like other countries have it. Other countries that don't have the kind of money we have, they have that. Why don't they have it? Well, we don't have it because politicians will say, well, we can't afford it. Now, listen, in a country where we have 750 billionaires that made $2 trillion in just 2 years, they paid 8.2% taxes on that amount of money compared to what we pay, which is like 13, 14%. The question is not really, can we afford it? Of course we can afford it. The question is, are we actually ever going to force these people to contribute the same way we contribute? Because what we're asking for is just one set of rules, and we all live by that set of rules. Not what we have right now, which is billionaires have their own set of rules. And they're contributing political donations to make sure that they can keep their set of rules so that they never have to pay into the system. And in the meantime, what we have is a system where a lot of people are going without, right? And billionaires are supporting politicians that support policies that eventually are going to screw you. Pennsylvania is a great example, right? There's a billionaire, the richest guy in Pennsylvania is this guy, Jeffrey Yass. Now you would think, who cares if he's a rich guy, whatever, rich people, they're doing their thing. Yes, and you know what the thing is that they're doing? They're electing politicians that are going to privatize schools because that's his pet project. So what he's going to do is he is going to elect politicians to get control of the state legislature so he can take money out of public school, that's your kid's school, and turn it over to private schools. And private schools will be able to control the school system. So I know it's a weird, it sometimes feels like, yeah, Jeff Bezos, whatever. Like, I kind of like him. Amazon, they deliver cat food to my house in snowstorms. Like, I'm for that. But we can't get sort of like lulled into this sense that it has nothing to do with us. It has a lot. There is impact, even if we don't see it on the front end.
And I want to add on to that too, just using a Nevada specific example and referencing the report that Brenda was talking about too, is a couple of the other names on that list include Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, who are the owners of Station Casinos here in Las Vegas. And I think they might own some in Reno too. What they have been doing is the Culinary Union, which is the biggest union here, represents most of the hospitality staff at various properties in Vegas, has had to drag them to court multiple times now to recognize their lawful union election that they've had with station and casino employees. And they just refuse to recognize the bargaining unit. They've been doing all kinds of oppo counter messaging, and in the media they put up like a billboard attacking the secretary treasurer of the Culinary Union. They've been doing all this union busting stuff too. So, you know, they're fancy themselves as little mini Jeff Bezoses, or Bezos-I, or whatever the plural of that would be, mini Jeff Bezos-I, to jack the wages and working conditions of this bargaining unit that is trying to collectively bargain with them. And that's analogous to what's going on just nationally with Amazon too, where it's like, in order to get you that cat food in a snowstorm, some poor delivery driver has to, you know, brave the traffic and drive through the snowstorm and probably skip meals and bathroom breaks to make sure it gets to you on the dot, or else, you know, their supervisor will be very, very unhappy with them. That's another example of just how, and especially as Amazon's market share grows and all of these other larger corporations' market share grows because of the pandemic, you know, folks find themselves employed by these people, and they're directly making decisions within the workplace that also screw you over and give you less money in compensation for your time and your labor and those things too. So it really does affect everything from the top to the bottom. It's why this tax reform conversation is so important. And MJ, I do want to come back to you because I want to talk about, I think it's a good segue, is this price gouging issue. Oh. So we're hearing a lot now. The Biden administration has been very vocal about this for a while now. Senators in Congress are speaking about this. Why do these corporations and their wealthy CEOs continue to get away with this price gouging, and everything from gas to prescription drugs seems like it's going up? What explains this phenomena, and how do we hold them accountable for their part in this record high inflation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I had a good answer for you. Look, it's a question of political will, right? And so the question is really whether lawmakers are going to feel more accountable to their constituents, or whether they're going to feel more accountable to their donors, right? And so on some issues, we have made progress, right? So certainly prescription drug reform, for many years during the Obama years, for 20 years, we've been trying to get negotiations in Medicare. We could never do it. If I'm honest, and a lot of people here in DC don't like to say this out loud because they feel very loyal to the Democrats, but I would say, if I'm honest, I think it's taken so long to get prescription drug reform because pharma shifted their political giving, and they were giving more to Democrats for a long time than to Republicans. And while Democrats were on the dole, they didn't want to regulate pharma. They didn't fight hard for negotiations. And then at some point, the prescription drug prices got so crazy, people started to die because they couldn't get insulin. And all of a sudden, public opinion started to shift. And then we saw in the last presidential that actually many candidates who previously had been very close to pharma, Cory Booker from New Jersey, for instance, Senator Booker, when he ran for president, he had been really a pharma darling. And when he ran for president, he said, no more pharma money. I'm not taking any more money from pharma. So he clearly had gotten the message from his constituents that he was going to have to pick a side. You're going to have to pick pharma, or you're going to have to pick your constituents, because we're not buying this whole you can't do it. And the reason that we are on the verge of winning prescription drug reform against pharma, and pharma, there's a lot of powerful lobbies in Washington, D.C. There's no lobby that's more powerful than pharma. Pharma has 2.5 lobbyists for every single member of Congress. They spend more money on lobbying than anybody. And the prescription drug industry in the United States of America is the most profitable industry in the country. More profitable than oil, more profitable than telecom, right? They are a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous opponent. But we are going to
nonsense about, if we regulate drug prices, they'll have no money for innovation, you know.
And what's amazing is people just aren't buying it. People aren't buying it. You know why they're not buying it? Because at the end of the day, they know that it doesn't have anything. When prescription drug corporations are raising the price of insulin 1,000% over 8 years, insulin is not new. There's nothing new about insulin. They're raising the price of asthma drugs. There's nothing new about that. They're raising the price of EpiPen. There's nothing new. Cancer drugs. These drugs are not even new drugs, so they can't justify it by saying innovation. Occasionally, when they pop out a new drug, the drug is so expensive that nobody can afford it. They popped out a new Alzheimer's drug, $60,000 for 1 year. Who can afford $60,000 for 1 year? So, innovation is all great, but here's what we should know. We pay for it. We're the taxpayers. We're the ones funding research and development in most cases. And it doesn't matter what the medicine is. New medicines can't help you if you can't afford them. Right? So the industry has lost a lot of credibility. And what's happened is Democratic politicians have realized that aligning themselves with pharma over patients is politically toxic. And Republicans realize that too. And if you remember when President Trump got elected, he ran on prescription drug negotiations, right? So he ran on the Democratic position, and all through his presidency, he talked about regulating the prescription drug companies. So I think at the end of the day, what has to happen is we have to build enough political power amongst regular people, and we have to put the squeeze on these members of Congress, because the only way we're going to get the things that we need is for Congress to understand that they work for us, they don't work for industry. Right. And it's hard to persuade them of that because industry has a lot of money and a lot of influence. But, why are they able to price gouge? I mean, the answer, why can prescription drug companies raise prices twice a year and price a drug at $60,000 a year? It's because Congress lets them. It's as simple as that. Why are gas prices going up? It's because Congress enables it. Right. So until we have members of Congress that are willing to regulate, that's going to continue to happen. That won't stop until Americans come together across party lines and say, you know what, enough is enough. Because at the end of the day, listen, if you're trying to get from point A to point B in whatever state you live in, and somebody's life depends on that, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you need affordable gas. right? Like, so I just think it's, we sort of sometimes get caught up in the partisanship of it, but the reality is everybody's getting screwed by the fact that corporations are being allowed to price gouge in this predatory way. And there's really nothing, I mean, the gas thing is crazy. I was just out in Montana, not too far from y'all, $5.70 for gas. I mean, it was like insane. Listen, we don't even get gas from Ukraine, right? So like, there's no reason for Europeans are paying $8 a liter, not a gallon, a liter. Okay, well, you know what? Portugal, France, Spain, they get their gas from Ukraine, and Ukraine's in a war. We don't get gas. We don't get our petrol from Ukraine. We get most of our oil from our own country or from South America. So there's literally no justification for this type of price gouging. And, Congress could stop it, and they should.
Yeah, 60 grand for 1 year's of treatment is more, I think, than most people's yearly salary.
I mean, imagine for Alzheimer's, who gets Alzheimer's? Seniors. You know what the average income for a senior on Medicaid is? It's $29,000 a year. So how on earth would somebody be able to afford, when that drug came onto the Medicare formulary, it increased premiums for everybody in Medicare. It's just pure predatory price gouging. And that's why we need negotiations, right? In Europe, other countries, not even Europe, India, like name your country, just about like anybody in the world pays less for prescriptions. But we are one of the few countries where drug companies have the monopoly power to just charge us whatever the hell they want. And the government says nothing about it, right? A company, I mean, think about it, it's insane. We're giving millions of dollars to these corporations to invent medicines, millions of taxpayer money, taxpayer dollars. These guys invent a medicine. They get it through clinical trials. They get a patent. We give them a patent on the medicine, which means then they have the exclusive power to price the medicine. So then they can charge us whatever the hell we want, whatever they want to charge us. I mean, when we contract with Boeing to build helicopters, we don't say to Boeing, go ahead and charge us whatever you want, right? We negotiate a price, obviously. When when the Pentagon is figuring out how much they want to pay for copy paper, they're not saying to the paper company, go ahead and charge us whatever.
Well, the caveat would be if the Secretary of Defense's nephew or something works for the
sure.
And then, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like stark raving crazy. Like, how would you ever invite, if your house needed a roof, would you ever invite a roofer over and say, go ahead and put a roof and then like charge me whatever you want? Of course not. That would be insane, right? Like nobody would do something that crazy. You would negotiate over the price. Well, how much is it going to be? And, there would be like a contract and some accountability. So it really, the way the prescription drug stuff works in this country, it really has been a giveaway to the drug corporations. And I think, the jig is up, right? And it's time now that public opinion, when you even have a majority, 70% of Republicans saying we need prescription drug negotiations, that this is going to happen because people are going to pay a political price if they don't take action.
That's right. And you spoke about reaching across the divide to persuade. And so here to talk to us about reaching across the divide to persuade, I want to bring back in Brenda, Brenda, can you tell us about telling stories as the work that you do primarily in engaging with volunteers and getting them to speak up and speak out. Can you talk about that work in the context of this issue, and how can we make the case for taxing the ultra wealthy in a way that relates to just everyday people's personal stories?
Yeah, definitely. As a story bank organizer for Battleborn Progress, I like to talk to community members all over the state. So as MJ was talking about earlier, a lot of teachers, firefighters, just like everyday working people are paying more in taxes than billionaires or millionaires. I know some family friends who are paying about $1,000 to $2,000 in taxes, and that's very hard on them. So I don't think that Elon Musk, if he's paying $2,000, obviously that's not fair, but $2,000 is nothing to them. Like, let's be real. If you can give away $120 million, then you can pay taxes. And I think that's just the truth of it all. So what we do is, if you have a story around taxes, you're paying taxes and it's really hard for you to do that, or anything on healthcare, prescription drug prices, I would definitely love to get in touch with you all. We are going to drop a link in the chat on how you can just join us, just filling out your information, your name, email, a phone number where I can reach you out, and I can set up a meeting with you all just to talk about the issues that go on in your personal lives. This is really important because when we can put a face to the issue, it's really impactful because obviously it's a real person. We can see this person is struggling. Like I said, I know people myself, if you're watching at home, you might know some other people who are obviously struggling to pay their taxes yearly. So if you or anyone have a story around this issue or any other issue, I would love to get in touch with you. Again, we're going to drop down the link in the chat, and I can also put my email in case anybody wants to reach out through email as well.
Terrific. And I really encourage you all to get involved with Brenda. We're doing some great stuff, getting folks engaged and working to have folks, get op-eds published, speaking out on issues, and even just a video that we share online. All of that stuff does, in fact, make a huge impact, because it's not only about empowering regular folks, but it's also about getting lawmakers to really see the face of what these issues affect in day-to-day life. So I want to now go to some audience questions, because we've been having a lively discussion here in the chat. And so I want to make sure these questions get answered. So first up is Richard is asking, are Manchin Cinema on board? I'm guessing that's in context of the reconciliation bill. So MJ, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, it's always a loaded question. So let me say that Manchin and Cinema are on board generally with some of the provisions. So the thing that everybody is the most on board with is the prescription drug reform. That's why that piece of it has already gone to the parliamentarian. So that's not controversial. Everybody already agrees. And in fact, Manchin has been very good on prescription drugs, oddly, but we have lobbied him many, many, many times, and we talked to his staff, and his position is that actually he would like to see the prescription drug reform go even further. And the reason he's not pushing for that is because Senator Sinema from Arizona is not for that. On the tax provisions, it's trickier. So Manchin is actually willing to go a bit further than Senator Sinema. Senator Sinema has said from the very beginning, she does not want to roll back any of the Trump tax cuts. So that's very limiting, right? Because the easiest thing to do would be to roll back some of the Trump tax cuts, and that would get us back to a place where at least corporations were paying a more fair rate. So I don't think there's complete agreement, but Manchin in general is supportive of raising taxes on millionaires, billionaires, and corporations. He wants to raise about $1.2 trillion in the package. Half that money he wants to put into deficit reduction. So, he's committed to raising money from the wealthy and corporations because he wants to reduce the deficit, and he thinks that will help with inflation. Cinema is like a little bit squirrelier. She's in a richer state. I think she generally agrees with a corporate minimum tax, which is one of the provisions. I think she generally agrees with increasing taxes on wealthy people only. She's like not all the way there on the Millionaire Surtax, so there's more work to be done. But in general, the big agreement is a package that's around $1 trillion, where half the money goes to deficit reduction, half the money goes to healthcare and climate. And so I'm still pretty optimistic that Senator Schumer, Senator Manchin are going to negotiate an agreement that is going to be acceptable. So basically an agreement that can get 51 votes. I think that's probably going to happen.
Well, that is encouraging. I would issue a challenge to folks who are watching the stream at home tonight to share this stream and tag Senator Kristen Sinema and tell her to watch it in between her meetings with wealthy donors, because I think it would be very educational for her. And also Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Rosen, she's right next door. She's right down there in Arizona. Go talk to her. Go figure out what the hell's going on, because this is too much. Next question is from Beverly. Says, do these billionaires really expect to hold on to all their money when there's no democracy left?
Well, it's a good question for them. I think so. I think they believe that their billions are going to insulate them. And I would say they're not wrong about that. Like these guys are building spaceships. They're like buying yachts. I think they will be very, very insulated from harm no matter what happens. And I think they have sort of two central goals. One is hoarding more wealth, so just making more money, just always making more, and then holding on to as much of it as possible. They sort of get like a little bit of, I don't want to call it a fiendish delight, but it's kind of like people when they shop and they get a sale. You go shopping, you get a sale and you're like, damn, I just scored big on this sale. That's how they feel about gaming the tax system. They're like, yeah, I just did a thing, right? So they do think that they're going to be insulated, and they believe that it's okay for them to stay insulated and hoard their wealth at the expense of other people.
Exactly. They'll all pile into the Elon Musk.
If billionaires were at risk, they're not worried about political party, right? They're all billionaires. Their allegiance and their ideology is about the money. It's not about their party. And they're willing to do whatever it takes and support either party if it allows them to hold on to their wealth and pass that dynastic wealth on generation after generation. So I think it's billionaires have this sort of like culture and like to tell this story about themselves that they made it big on their own. Naturally, it's nonsensical. Like Elon Musk is famous for what? Selling electric cars. So he didn't get rich on his own because somebody is buying those cars. He's got customers, right? Like Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, he didn't get rich by himself because people are buying stuff on Amazon, right? He's dependent upon American consumers. He's got a trucking company to move those goods, and he's dependent upon taxpayers to pay for those roads. So this kind of like ideology that somehow rich people become super rich because they're geniuses or what have you is nonsensical. They're getting rich off of everybody else. And what we're asking them to do is the same thing that we ask a Main Street hardware store owner to do, which is give back. Give back. Just give back your fair share. We're happy. This is America. We want people to be entrepreneurial and successful, but we want everybody to give back so that then more people have that opportunity. And the thing about billionaires is they don't feel like they should have to give back. They feel like they got theirs. Good enough. They're not giving back because somehow it was their own genius that got them their billions of dollars.
And just to give an example of Elon Musk's genius, his way of giving back to the city of Las Vegas is, rather than, helping us develop some kind of cool, clean energy tech or some, electric powered mass transit system instead, he is having giant tunnels dug underneath the strip in downtown so that people can drive in a one tube automated car back and forth from the strip to the airport.
The dude is weird. He's a weird dude. I'm just going to say like Elon Musk. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so my next question here is from Amber. Amber asks, how do we get money out of politics? Is it possible to address campaign finance and or money for lobbying? I think this is interesting because we talked about Citizens United, how that really screwed us out of McCain-Feingold. And so what options do we have now, especially given that the Supreme Court's even worse than it was back then?
Yeah, no, it's a pickle. Campaign finance reform, it is the central challenge, right? We're in a catch-22. So of course we need campaign finance reform, and we need to get money out of politics, both Democratic and Republican money out of politics. It's hard to know how we would do it. There's no clear pathway to do it. So, I think what we have to do, there aren't that many successful examples, but I do see some examples where people power outweighs the money, right? Honestly, prescription drug reform is an example like that, where it's really one of the first times I've ever seen politicians say no to massive pharma donations because they didn't want to be associated with pharma. And they thought it was more politically dangerous. You know, Cory Booker thought, I can't run for president on the Democratic ticket and take money from pharma. So I think at this point, the only thing that we have is people power that really creates political liability for politicians that take money. But I don't disagree with Amber at all. I think in the long term, we need to figure out how to have enough political power to really fundamentally reform the system and get money out of politics.
Yeah, and I think too that, you know, when you think even about the case of Citizens United, and what was at the center of that was was a documentary that was made about Hillary Clinton during the 2012 during the 2008 primary. And, you know, it gets into this conversation of these billionaires contributing to these right-wing candidates who are spreading these election lies and disinformation. And, you know, that stuff, the reason that stuff works and why it's so scary is because we have a population of people who are unfortunately not engaging with this stuff in a rational and critical way and are instead passively consuming this messaging. But I think if we speak out in the way of like Brenda's storyteller program and programs like this and tell the truth about these things, and people are savvy media consumers, then, you know, they could spend all the billions in the world on political advertisements and it wouldn't make a difference because we would have a population of informed, rational thinking voters. Mm-hmm. And so I want to go then to Brian's question, which is, what will it take to have laws in place that spread wealth to communities? And I think what Brian's getting at here is like, how do we make sure that the revenue that's generated from this bill goes towards things that are actually going to help, you know, communities like here in East Las Vegas or North Las Vegas. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think that that's easier, to be honest, at the federal level than in states, right? Because in states, when states do tax increases, a lot of times it goes into general revenue, and then politicians can kind of use it for whatever. And that's one reason for that is because, you know, at the state level, you have to balance your state budget. Most states have to have a balance, you know, everything has to sort of balance out. At the federal level, in a lot of ways, it's easier because, you know, there's a couple things at the federal level. One, neither party, neither Republicans or Democrats are willing to raise revenue unless it's a pay for a specific thing. So what I mean by that is, we could, in this reconciliation package, just raise taxes on the wealthy and generate $2 trillion, $3 trillion in revenue, but there's really no appetite for that. People will raise revenue for a specific thing. We'll raise taxes amounting to this amount to pay for healthcare, and that'll be over a period of 10 years. We'll raise to pay for these climate provisions for a period of 10 years. So like the budget is, the reconciliation package is a 10-year package, and the revenue just matches up with whatever we're trying to finance. So I think we have a little bit, in terms of accountability for how the money is spent, I think we have a little bit more of that up here than we do in some states, because actually up here we have a situation where neither Republicans nor Democrats are willing to do anything without a pay for. But one thing that I think is really important, I don't think people think about this, the tax system itself is a system of redistribution. We don't think of it that way, but it is, because it pays for things that then increase opportunity and wealth, whether those things are education or whether it's, you know, providing people with an opportunity to get housing or whether it's jobs or whatever. But we could even go further in making the tax system a vehicle for equity and for reducing the racial wealth gap. That is why we want to tax rich people, right? Is because we want to create a system where the redistribution is much more deliberate about creating a level opportunity for people, because we don't really have that right now. And the other thing that we want is policies for IRS enforcement that would enable the IRS to actually crack down on rich people. One of the reasons why rich people don't pay much in taxes is the IRS doesn't enforce tax laws on rich people in the same way they do middle income people. And it's a little bit crazy. It's a rabbit hole, but when you sort of talk with the IRS or you talk with people like Janet Yellen about why we can't have a wealth tax, they will say crazy things like, we don't have any way to measure wealth, right? So there are some people that are so rich, like we can't actually figure out how rich they are. And if we could figure out their wealth, then we would be able to tax them, right? So like if we had an IRS that was staffed up to do that, the IRS has been chronically understaffed for many years, but there's just a lot we can do with the tax system, and we don't really use it that way here in the US. It's too bad.
You know, I'm sometimes a little anxious about checking my bank account on my phone because I'm worried that there might be too little in there, but these folks are scared because there's such an astronomical amount that it probably breaks the algorithm. That is just wild. So I want to kind of bring things to a close. And I think the way I want to do that is going to sort of combine both of the questions that Shelby had asked. What are the chances our electeds will sack up and actually pass this? And how do we get out in front of the messaging that Dems just raised taxes? We kind of addressed this at the top of the call. But I want to actually start with Brenda and give you kind of the last word on basically, you know, it's not going to happen unless we make it happen. I think that's been pretty clear. So what is the message and how do we bring this to the forefront to make sure that this is successful by August 1st?
I think here in our state, we can do this by joining the Story Bank program. And you can do that again by just putting your information down in the chat. We're going to drop the link again. You make a really big difference. We, like Will said, we do letters to the editor, op-eds, media interviews. We do like posts on social with pictures or videos. A lot of our other storytellers have already done some videos like that. So I think the best way to get out in front of the problem is just to kind of put yourself out there. And I know it's kind of scary when I talk to people, they're like, I don't really want my face out there. I'm not really sure how to share my story, but I think the right step is just to put yourself out there and get in touch with us.
Excellent. And MJ, you want to bring us home?
I think that a lot of people are worried, including a lot of Democrats, that if they raise taxes on rich people, that they're going to be attacked for being tax and spend Democrats. And I only have really two things to say about that. Taxing rich people is, next to prescription drug reform, it's the most popular thing in America. And I'm not just talking with Democrats, I'm talking blue collar Republican white guys love the idea of taxing billionaires. So if you are looking for an issue that brings people together across class, race, and place, it is taxing rich people, because everybody in America, like those of us who are not rich, are very aware that the rich have advantages that the rest of us don't have. So it's very popular. So that's not a good excuse for not moving forward. And I think we just need to tell people, we're not talking about taxing people like you and me. We are talking about taxing billionaires and millionaires. That's why it's called the Millionaire Surtax, right? If you don't have $10 million in assets, this doesn't apply to you. So like, that's like everybody I know. It doesn't apply to anybody I know. So that's like number one. Number two, look, Democrats are going to be attacked on taxes anyway, so they might as well like suck it up and be grown-ups and stop being afraid of an issue. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. If somebody wants to attack a Democrat, right? Like somebody's going to attack Susie Lee or somebody's going to attack Senator Cortez Masto for wanting to tax rich people. I would welcome that attack. And I would say, yeah, I do. I want to tax rich people because I want my constituents who are struggling with the price of gas and healthcare and housing to get a fair shot at those things. And we can do that in the United States of America if rich people were to pay their fair share. So I think some of it is like Democrats are kind of trapped in this, like, I don't know, in the Reagan years or something, where they're like, blah, 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 tax and spend. Listen, it is a new day. People in America have been watching rich people getting richer, literally your neighbors being evicted, while these billionaires are on TV building rocket ships. Like, it's nuts, right? So like, we Democrats should not shy away from the tax fight. We should get in a fight that we can win. There's some fights we can't win. We can win this one. And we ought to be proudly saying, yes, we are the party that wants to tax millionaires and billionaires and make them follow the same rules and pay what they owe, just like janitors, just like nurses, just like firefighters. This is America. There ought to be one set of rules for everybody, and everybody ought to contribute. And I think that's a great message. We don't have anything to be defensive about.
Yeah, we need a little bit of that FDR spirit.
Right. It's like, come on, suck it up. It's like baffling to me, these Democrats. It's like, wait a minute, you are a politician, right? You did run for public office. And what are you going to do? Like crumple up and cry because somebody taxed you for being a tax and spend liberal? Listen, if somebody's accusing you of taxing billionaires, wear that badge with pride. Yes, I am the one that's going to tax billionaires and make them pay more of their fair share. I'm not going to do what the former president did and give away more tax breaks, more giveaways to people that already have so much money that if they spent every second of every day, they would still die rich, right? So like, I just think a little bit, we have to be pushy with our electeds and push them to be brave and back them up, because this is a fight that we can win. And for all the heat that the Democrats are getting right now about, are they really the party of the working class? If Democrats want to be the party of the working class, they should be the party of the working class and tax the rich.
Yeah. For our Gen Z audience, there's a statement by President FDR in which he said, they're unanimous in their hate for me and I welcome their hatred.
Absolutely.
I think, when we talk about FDR energy, I think we mean more so that New Deal trust buster, not so much, the Japanese internment part. But there are powerful lessons to learn from history where at one point, and I think that's an important historical example, right? Because that was at a time too, where the kind of austerity government that, our lovely Hoover Dam is named after, was inspired by, and, that was coming off of the Gilded Age, which I feel like due to all the deregulation caused by Ronald Reagan et al., has led us now into Gilded Age Part 2. And I think in order to reverse course, we've got to get aggressive and we've got to get it done. All right. Well, I want to thank both of you, MJ and Brenda, for the excellent show and discussion tonight. We will catch you live here again next week on Out in Front at 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 21st. See you all. Oh, we've got a cat.
You said FDR and she came right up. I mean, I think she might be a socialist. I'm not sure. Introduce us before we go. That's Ginger. She's lobbying, she's a great, here in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of great lobbyists. My cats are the best lobbyists in the entire city of Washington, D.C. She is right now lobbying to get another snack before bedtime. So I don't know. Big
Pharma is going to be headhunting for her.
Yeah, look, somebody, you know what? We should hire her to get this tax thing passed. She would do it. She would irritate the crap out of people until finally Democrats vote for it.
No doubt. Well, thank you all again so much, and we'll catch you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.